Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. We are over the top excited with our guests today, the folks from Stacks, formerly Blockstack. But first, before we do that and bring them on, John's going to go through some social for y'all.
Great. Thanks, Joe. And to everyone out there, make sure you're subscribing to our YouTube channel so you can get all of these great LunarCRUSH live streams. So I'm going to start today just going through some of the insights that we're seeing on LunarCRUSH.com for Blockstack. And so, I'll just stop right at their header image that we pull in from Twitter. I was beyond excited seeing built on Stacks, secured by Bitcoin. Aside from this live stream, how cool. So really excited. So when we look at what they've been talking about, we see a lot of what they're posting is about STX, of course, and we see that they're talking a lot about Bitcoin. And we look through some of their posts, and there's things like the OK Coin announcement, Stacks 2 announcement, this live stream, which just came out the last few days, some of those posts there. A lot of stuff from Cointelegraph. And when we look at these posts, what we're actually doing is, as these things are coming in, we're also giving these a score. And so we're scoring these for if they're very bearish to very bullish. So there's sentiment scoring that runs across our machine learning library. And we're also looking at spam. So is there any spam that we're picking up for anyone that's mentioning STX? And so we look at all of that, and we look at it over time. And so when we look at those, all of those posts coming from all of those users, specifically in this scenario here, I'm going to show you what Twitter users are most influential. And we see that over the last year, objectively based upon really a few different factors, we see that these are the top influencers. And what I mean by that is that we're seeing that based upon engagement. So the posts that these individuals are posting get a ton of engagement. We're seeing that they have quite a following for each of these user accounts. And we see that these users have a lot of activity. And so when we weigh all of that out across various timeframes, we see that the Stacks ecosystem, Muneeb, Larry Cermak, Ian Balina, OKCoin, Blockchain, Cointelegraph, and Marvin Johnson, over the last year, we see that these individuals are posting a lot. And how that looks over time, I'm going to pull up the last month here of Blockstack, where there's been quite a lot of activity. So let's look at actually a few different metrics here, where we see that social volume. So this is the number of Blockstack mentions. This could be the ticker, hashtag Blockstack. It's the Stacks 2. If it's hashtag Stacks 2 Stacks, we're looking at multiple variants that relate to Blockstack. And we see that social activity, those mentions, are up 109%. over the past month. Underneath all of that, in all of those posts, we capture engagement. So this is things like retweets and comments on all of those posts that relate to Blockstack, and we see that that's up 96.5%. And then when we look at the number of individuals that are actually posting, so social contributors measures the number of individual user accounts that are posting about Blockstack. We see that that's up 226%. And then as a measure across the entire ecosystem of crypto, all coins that we track, we see that the dominance, which is the percentage of total out of all of the social posts that are going on out there across all the cryptocurrencies, social dominance for Blockstack over the last month is up 123%. All of that in total, we also see that price is up 22.78%. And I just wanted to point out real quick before we bring in our guests, I mean, just relatively speaking, where does this stack up? So obviously Bitcoin's the king of all the activity out there. And we see that, Bitcoin had 3.7 million tweets over the last month. We see that Blockstack had 5,307, 17 million engagements versus 20 billion engagements. So everyone's talking about Bitcoin. I just want to give some relative understanding with how awesome and early it is to talk about Blockstack today. Giving a few more examples, Ethereum, 650,000 social mentions versus 5,300. If we bring it down a little lower to say Polkadot, 29,000 versus 5,300. And if we bring it down even lower, something like a Filecoin, 19,000 mentions versus 5,300. So a really exciting early stage opportunity here. I'm super happy. Let's bring in our guest, Joe.
Cool. Boom. What's up, guys?
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks for being here today. Really appreciate you guys coming on and excited to talk to you guys. You know, I tweeted out yesterday, and John and I's history goes way back in crypto, but one of the moments that really kind of got us into the space, and one of the moments that actually made me decide to go into crypto full time, was the Blockstack Summit in 2017 at the Computer History Museum that we went to. And it was like, you know, the most ridiculously like in-depth technical presentations ever. And I was just like enthralled. And we were just like, there's no marketers in this space yet. It's just the smartest people in the room. And I was just happy to be there. So thank you guys for that. I wanted to start with, but yeah, Muneeb, maybe you can introduce yourself. What do you do at Blockstack and Stacks? And where are you in the world today? And what's it like there?
Awesome. Well, it's first of all, it's great to hear about the Blockstack Summit. I feel like there are some really amazing stories that actually link back to our summit, and great to hear this one. I was not aware of this.
Yeah.
Well, hi everyone. I'm Muneeb. I'm the founder of Stacks. Well, you should think of Blockstack as it's decentralizing, right? So there are a bunch of like different independent entities within our ecosystem now. And Stacks is also kind of like the name of our blockchain and the cryptocurrency. So it made a lot of sense to simplify the project around the Stacks brand. And whereas the company that kind of like did the early R&D, which is Blockstack PBC, that I co-founded and I serve as the CEO of, we have rebranded to Hero. I know it could be a little bit confusing in the beginning, but we truly think that in the long term, it just makes a lot of sense to keep the project and the cryptocurrency and the decentralized network separate from any company, right? So Hero builds developer tools on top of the blockchain, but then there are so many other independent entities like the nonprofit Stacks Foundation. We have Freehold, which is like an entity for super fans and community. We have Asia-based entities and clients and wallets and so on and so forth.
Yeah, a whole lot going on. And reading through that, you know, some of the pages that you guys gave us yesterday to go through, you guys have a lot going on. And I think the rebrand is smart, and it's part of kind of the ecosystem that you're about to build out, and, you know, twisting everything, you know, backwards on its head to grow. So it's exciting to see that. And then Joe, what's your role there? What you up to?
Hey there. Thanks for having us. Awesome to be on for this conversation. My name is Joe Bender. I'm a developer evangelist at Blockstack. I joined 8 months ago. Unfortunately, I have never been to a Blockstack summit in person. I've only heard legends and dusty tomes with the knowledge that was dispersed at these events. Yeah, I'm going to make it to one eventually, but a good segue, as this year has had kind of a lack of in-person events, and everyone knows, what does developer evangelist do in the space? Goes around and spreads the gospel, I guess. So this year has been a lot of the virtual event grind, doing a lot of workshops, AMAs, and interviews. Also some cool like experiential stuff, going into crypto voxels and doing virtual Olympic races in a metaverse. And I mean, I also joined right before the testnet spun up, the testnet for Stacks 2.0. So my whole journey at Blockstack has kind of mirrored the development of the Stacks 2.0 mainnet, which has been really exciting to see it grow, see the community grow, see the tech evolve, see our brand and messaging be adopted more widely. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster, and just hanging on tight.
Great. Yeah, no, it's good to hear. And I mean, so, you know, you started 8 months ago, you know, we started kind of going to the COVID-ness. Are you guys now fully remote? Have you optimized for remote? Are you going fully remote? Like, how's it been kind of getting through this, especially with how much you guys are growing and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think so. Blockstack PBC was roughly like 40% remote. Like our engineering team was more remote than the rest of the functions. But our home base is kind of like New York City. That's where I'm based out of. So we actually, I'll tell the story. Like, so Balaji is a friend of the project, and he was speaking at one of our meetups in Austin, which is where we went. And this is early February. And Balaji
February 12th, I just looked it up.
February 12th, right? And Balaji was ahead of the curve, right? Like he showed up at the event with masks and like his protective gear and everything. And we had dinner with me and Patrick, who now runs Freehold in our ecosystem. And it's safe to say that he freaked us out. The first thing that we did after on the flight back is like we started ordering like all sorts of supplies, and we started telling everyone that we're going to shift to like working remotely pretty quickly, and that turned out to be the right thing to do. Since then, we've been very much like working from home. The transition was pretty smooth because I think given it's an open source project and there are Stacks chapters around the world, they're like almost like all the work just happens online anyway. I personally do miss the office and that kind of like human interaction, but from a project perspective, I feel like we were very well prepared for this.
Yeah, no, we think about it in the same way where it's just, we have over 200 countries now with people coming to the site, and you have to optimize for global. You just have to, and localization is a huge deal. So in our space, you just see people optimizing for it early on. And yeah, that's funny. Like early on with Blogi, it was shouting from the rooftops on Twitter, like, get your shit together. Like it's coming, like just that 30 to 40 days ahead of time, maybe even more, maybe 2 months. And yeah, we were listening to that as well. And we closed down everything, but thank God for him there. That was good. Yeah, I wanted to now just talk a little bit about just Stacks 2.0. I mean, like John and I, we've been there since day one, kind of following you guys, Reg A Plus, all these things that had kind of gone on, and, we followed and saw the kind of the progression of it. So let's just talk like right now, like next 30 days, like what's happening.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Basically, I think one thing that people should really think about when they think about, the way we do work, like we definitely have this culture of tackling the hard problems, like doing the right things, even if, it takes longer or it's the harder thing to do, right? Yeah. Like I feel like it is more clear sometimes when it comes to compliance, because people realize that, getting a SEC qualification or figuring out this legal framework for explicit decentralization, those are like very hard things, and people can like grok it a little bit better. Mm-hmm. But it's almost like the same applies to the technology, and actually even more so. Like that's what we do. Like we're computer scientists and engineers. That's what we've been heads down on for a very long time. So I think like there are many areas where sometimes you would have an easier, quicker decision versus the harder thing. Let me take the example of the Clarity smart contract language. Right? It takes a while to invent a new programming language, and we're not inventing it for the sake of inventing it. If something was out there that was, applicable to the problems we're trying to solve, we'll just use it. But you really can't use JavaScript-like programming languages and keep hundreds of millions of dollars of worth of assets on them, right? Like it's scary. It actually scares me as an engineer when I think through these things. So we've been developing more secure programming languages where developers, I think the best way to think about that is more precise tools for developers, so that it's harder for them to hurt themselves, right? Like so that if you give them better tooling, they would produce safer code, because you have formal verifications for these programs and so on. So that is going live with Stacks 2.0. And the other big thing is our almost like mega thesis around Bitcoin as the foundation for this future internet, right? Like we're seeing a lot of innovation. And by the way, experimentation is great. Like people are coming out and they're building all sorts of different networks. But I feel like if anything, we're seeing less experimentation on top of Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin is stabilizing as yes, it's a store of value and digital gold. And we're coming in and we're saying, no, Bitcoin is like TCP/IP.
Yes.
And you don't need to change TCP/IP, but you can just build on top of it, which is what our blockchain does, right? Like it brings in those missing features, like full smart contracts with Clarity and scalability in some ways, because you can do thousands of transactions on the Stacks chain, and it will result only in a single hash on Bitcoin. So it's a little bit like Bitcoin for us acts as the ground truth. Everything that happens on the Stacks chain gets packaged up and is stored on Bitcoin as a hash. And our consensus algorithm is very unique. It's pretty much like the first consensus algorithm between two blockchains, right? So it's not that we are just running consensus within a single blockchain. We want to agree on data with Bitcoin. And we view Bitcoin as the ultimate source of truth. So it's a very unique design in that sense. And similarly for the crypto asset stacks, right? Like if you are participating in a more traditional proof of stake type of a network, you lock up your assets and you earn more DOT or more ETH2 when that goes live or something. Whereas in stacks, if people are participating in consensus and they lock up STX, they actually have the opportunity to earn Bitcoin directly from the protocol, which is a very interesting property. And we can kind of like go.
Yeah, that can you explain?
Yeah.
That's what John and I were talking about last night a little bit, because when we saw it, first off, like bringing smart contracts to Bitcoin, genius. Like, that's where this space needs to go, and it's going to solidify, I think, a lot of these DeFi dApps that will be out there to larger institutional people that otherwise might not want to invest in, I will say, X.finance, right? That's out there today. That might be something else. So that, like, congratulations on that and going that direction. I think that's huge. And then last night we were talking about, so how exactly am I staking and getting BTC and like stacks, and how does that work with like the wallet and everything? Yeah, we've got our stackers and we've got our wallets. How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me answer the first one about these applications. And I think the best way to think about this is Bitcoin is so valuable that people are going out of their way to even issue synthetic Bitcoin on their chains.
Yes.
Right? Like we're seeing the rise of wrapped BTC, and there will be certain people in the Bitcoin community who, no matter what happens, they're never going to touch another blockchain with a 10-foot pole, right? Like they're like, I don't trust the security of Solidity or ERC20 or something, and that thing, like I'm not going to touch that no matter what. So we're trying to bring this functionality more natively to Bitcoin. So what happens is that if our blockchain is a little bit like, we call it a connected chain, but it's in the design space of side chains. Like it's not exactly a side chain, like it's a connected chain, but what's happening is when you're moving Bitcoin to our chain, it's actually your Bitcoin is still being secured by Bitcoin, right? So the state on our chain is getting secured by Bitcoin. Someone has to attack Bitcoin to be able to kind of like change the history of our blockchain as well, right? So there's a direct security benefit. Then I think the other part is the Clarity smart contract language, because these people tend to be more conscious of smart contract bugs and what type of risk am I taking. So by providing formal verification and proofs, you're actually saying, like, for example, because our contracts, they also can view Bitcoin state, meaning that there's some Bitcoin transaction. These contracts actually know that transaction has happened on the base Bitcoin chain, which is a very almost like a superpower to have. You can write computer logic around it. So for example, you can do things like, even if there is a custodial service that you're using to issue Bitcoin on our chain, the smart contract can monitor Bitcoin directly to verify that there's enough Bitcoin deposits on the main chain, right? So it's really a security play that is just more secure to do this directly on Bitcoin, and that connects to our consensus algorithm. So the way the consensus algorithm works is our miners for stacks, they have visibility into both Bitcoin and stacks.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're a holder, what you're doing is you're saying that I am willing to lock up my stacks and run a full node, and you have to periodically broadcast some useful information on the network. And you're actually broadcasting your Bitcoin address. So a reward cycle is like 2 weeks. So you broadcast your Bitcoin address and you attach some useful information about the network with it. And you're kind of like saying, I'm actively kind of like participating in consensus. And the miners will see the Bitcoin addresses from the STX holders, right? And that makes up a reward address. And then on the mining side, I think the key thing there, and this is super fascinating, because in many ways, for me personally, like it actually closes the loop on the original vision that even Satoshi had. Like if you pull out like old Satoshi forum posts, right, he talks about how these different blockchains can have use cases, like more specific additional use cases. But it would be great if they could just share the security of Bitcoin, right? And that led to things like merge mining and other types of efforts. And we feel like we've cracked something really important here, where instead of even merge mining, you're directly using Bitcoin and as proof of computation, right? So what we're saying is On the Bitcoin main chain, people need to kind of like burn electricity and have computer hardware to mint a Bitcoin. But once you have a Bitcoin, it already has a proof that someone has done the work to produce this Bitcoin, right? So we consume that. It's a one step of interaction, right? So we consume the Bitcoin as input to mining to secure the Stacks chain, right? And the way it looks is there's almost like a bidding that's going on. So people who want to mine, they're mining on the Bitcoin chain, and they are bidding for mining the next block, and their bids come in as Bitcoin, right? So it's almost like you look at what is the value of a new STX block. The value is the new STX, the Coinbase STX that's coming out, plus any transactions and smart contracts that are executing in that block. So miners are willing to bid on like, hey, I'm willing to bid like X amount of Bitcoin to mine this block. And there is a verifiable random function that picks up a miner. And the miner will only do this if they can get cheaper STX through mining versus, let's just say, buying on exchanges.
Yeah.
That is a very interesting native mechanism where now value in Bitcoin rewards is flowing to the STX holders. I think the real thing that I'm excited about is obviously the launch, but right after the launch, there are a bunch of these smart contracts that are going live. And on those smart contracts, the more usage these smart contracts get, the higher the miners are willing to bid for the block, right? Because they're getting more STX.
Yeah.
Which means that netbook usage is now directly tied to Bitcoin rewards flowing to STX holders. And that's a very interesting closed loop for value. And then when you go to developers, like for example, let's say you're running a decentralized exchange that does a lot of, let's say, ETH versus other assets trading. You can go to developers and be like, well, this is great. This is clearly a big market. But imagine how much trading happens against the BTC pairs, right? Or if you want to start that, like this is the way to start it directly around Bitcoin, right? It's just a bigger market. So I think our kind of like when we go out and talk to developers, we talk about the security of the Clarity language. We talk about kind of like legal and compliance that, hey, you don't have to worry about some of these things. But the biggest thing really is that Bitcoin is just a bigger market. Like, so if you're building your smart contract, you might want to apply that and build it in the bigger market.
Yeah, no, thank you for that explanation. And it's interesting to hear you talk about that, and even like knowing a little bit of the history of like something like a TCP/IP, where like people don't realize that there was like competition to that, right? And if it wasn't the U.S. government that basically owned it, maybe they wouldn't have won that, right? It might not have been the best thing, but there are holes in that. And so you guys are creating this kind of like emergence and convergence of like data and money, and then allowing to like have people build on top of that. So like Joe, part of your job, it sounds like, is to bring people in the fold. Is that like the number, like, is that what people are coming to you guys for, saying, oh, I get to build on Bitcoin now? I've always like, holy shit, I can do that now.
Yeah, I mean, Muneeb just hit on so many good points.
Yeah, you're over there nodding.
Incentives, because so many projects and new protocols decided to forsake the Bitcoin blockchain and go out on their own and leave the nest. And it comes with a huge bootstrapping problem. You're trying to spin up an entirely new community. And like Muneeb said, getting a little echo maybe. And like Muneeb said, there are a lot of Bitcoiners that will hold their ground and not experiment with any of these other protocols. So not only are you getting the benefit of security of the Bitcoin blockchain through the consensus mechanism and being anchored to Bitcoin security, but the fact you can also receive rewards from stacking in a core protocol currency like Bitcoin. In so many of these other protocols, you're staking a certain token in this independent community, and then you're receiving that same token back, and you're not really diversifying your assets at all, and all your eggs are in one basket, and it's a fledgling startup blockchain project. The fact that you are receiving Bitcoin for a monetary reward for socially participating in the Stacks 2.0 blockchain is a huge incentive to those Bitcoiners that have been sitting on the sideline and watching people have fun with crypto kitties and meme coins and NFTs and digital assets and all this stuff. So we really think Stacks 2.0 is kind of a blueprint for how to bring some of that fun, expressive crypto ecosystem that we see springing up in other places to the Bitcoin world, the most secure and the most household name crypto in the game right now.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, and it's some of the projects that we've seen kind of built through DeFi. There's so much. I mean, John, some of the ones that we follow, it's just the creativeness around some of these projects and the people that are building on them. I mean, some of these Telegram channels, it's like full-time entertainment with the graphics that these people are coming up with. And I'm like, you do wish that a lot of that energy was pushed towards something like Bitcoin, or at least somewhere else that has, like you guys are saying, the security on top of that. But I love it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the utility side of this. I've had so many arguments with so many people. Some people have the belief that Bitcoin doesn't really do anything. It's just a store of value. And I'd love to hear where you think the utility is going to come from, and where do you see demand going? Like, is it from the legal standpoint? Is it property? Is it web applications? What kind of things do you think are going to be built on this?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and basically what happens is, like, if you almost like look at the crypto industry, like obviously there's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of like interesting creative things happening, but at the same time, like, imagine the amount of like tribal warfare that happens in crypto as well. And sometimes it's actually the biggest projects that are fighting with each other, right?
Exactly.
Bitcoin and Ethereum. And some of the newer projects, we actually tend to be like very friendly with each other. Like Algorand, we have a partnership with them. Like Solana and others, we are thinking of doing like hackathons together and whatnot, right? But if you look at the bigger projects, there's actually like very much like tribal warfare happening. And interestingly, it's a little bit of a misunderstanding on both sides, right? Like where this argument, I've heard it so many times, actually it's used against Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin is like a quote unquote one-trick pony, right? It cannot do anything other than payments, and even payments is not good at, because the blockchain doesn't scale, and you cannot even buy coffee with Bitcoin. Well, that's not what Bitcoin is meant to do, right? It's a store of value, but it has a settlement protocol on it, right? And that settlement protocol is very generic. You could buy, thousands of cups of coffees and then just do one settlement on Bitcoin, and that's fine. I think the issue is that Bitcoin is still the biggest brand name and the biggest community, and whoever enters crypto likely first hears about Bitcoin. But then there is this almost like a false fork in the road, that if you want to do anything interesting, if you want to build CryptoKitties, or if you want to build like a domain name system or NFTs or whatever, then you need to go and explore like these other blockchains. And Ethereum is obviously the kind of like the major one that stands out. And then there's fragmentation, right? And what we're saying is that you can just do all of that on Bitcoin directly. And interestingly, because we are building on, kind of like connected to Bitcoin, then you don't see those types of arguments where people are saying ETH is money, because we're not trying to be money, right? So we're not trying to compete with the reserve currency aspect of Bitcoin. We are actually growing in harmony with Bitcoin. It's almost like picking your own lanes. That Bitcoin, you're taking on a much bigger challenge. You're actually trying to be sovereign money. Stacks is not sovereign money. Stacks is basically, think of that as, if AWS had some sort of a AWS coin, and anytime you need to run a computation on AWS, you have to pay in that, right? So if you want to run smart contracts on the Stacks chain, you have to pay in the Stacks cryptocurrency. And by the way, the Stacks holders would get more Bitcoin rewards when that happens, right? It's that's just how the economics are concerned. But we are not then fighting with Bitcoin and saying Stacks is also money, right? And Stacks is actually going to overtake Bitcoin. No, like it's a system that is designed to grow in harmony with Bitcoin.
No, thanks for walking through that. And yeah, I mean, when you were talking a little bit about, the Reg A plus the security, you guys went through a lot to make that happen. First people to do that. I did read in the notes that you guys had sent that, I don't know if you're fully unwinding that, or if the current platform is now going to be a utility token. How does that even, like, is it a security token before, and then now you can just turn it into a utility token? Why not do a separate thing? Like, what was some of the logic behind that? I mean, I think I know why you're doing it, and it makes complete sense, but like, I'd love to hear you talk about it.
So I think it's basically, think of this as Stacks was always a utility token, and it always has been a utility token. It's just that different jurisdictions around the world have different types of laws and regulations. And when you look at the US jurisdiction, let's just say that it's not completely clear that the SEC wouldn't say that this is a security, especially when we were raising capital, right? When we were doing the offering, the 2017 offering that we did, and then the 2019 offering where the public was participating.
Yeah.
So what we effectively said was that there's no point in taking any risk here. Let's just assume for the purpose of the offering that we will treat this thing as if it's a security, and just comply with all of the regulations. Like, why take the risk,
Right.
And that was almost like a clean way of doing this, because that means you can not only that, we can sleep peacefully at night, that we explicitly got a SEC qualification to do the offering. Then we treated it as a security within the US. So we kept doing all of the reporting requirements. So our company, we effectively do reporting like a public company, right? And there's benefit there. There's a lot of transparency. There's a lot of public disclosure. There's less information asymmetry. People can find out anything about the project or the people involved and so on, which is a good thing. Obviously, it comes with some overhead, and now what we are saying is that after that this system has been running for years now, and there are more than 400 applications and so many independent entities, and especially with SAX 2.0 launching, it's being launched by independent miners. And our company that did the initial R&D is no longer responsible for this blockchain at all, because we were building STAX 2.0 and the network was supposed to kind of like upgrade to STAX 2.0. But once it upgrades, we no longer control this thing, right? So it's a little bit like when Satoshi, if it was a person or a group of people, they were actually building the code base, they were more in control. So you could argue that this could be a security. But once the network is live and clearly, there's no dependence on any single company. Like we released the legal framework that this thing that was a utility token throughout, now it's abundantly clear that even in the US, you can treat it as a non-security.
Yes. No, I read it with an abundance of caution. It was like, that was the line, which it makes complete sense. And so, thanks for clarifying that. We got like a little bit, I want to go into like just a little bit of the past maybe, and then we can pop back to some of the STAX 2.0 stuff. But, obviously you guys are both very smart guys, been around, you've done a lot. I want to know why are you working in this space? Like, why cryptocurrency? You could probably be doing a lot of different things. Like what is it and why? Like, why are you working in it?
I'll let Joe go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe. He's like, now he's making his head. He's like, oh God.
Oh man, putting me on the spot. I mean, listen, I can sit here and pull out all the generic arguments that have been on every crypto podcast since the beginning of time. Fight back against the corporations, give power to the people, self-sovereign identity. I can rifle these off. But I think this has been an intriguing year for everyone. And if you look around, I think that 5-10 years ago, when people were shouting blockchain's potential and benefits from the rooftops, it didn't gain the mainstream adoption we really would have wished for. Now you look around, and if you are not grasping the importance of privacy and digital security in the climate of today, in the rapid advancement of technology and internet and connectivity, you're missing the point. I think that I couldn't imagine myself working anywhere else right now. We've seen so many breaches of people's rights on the internet over the last 5 to 10 years of social media companies harvesting our data and selling it to advertisers, and media conglomerates controlling what we digest and the information we consume. I really think now is the juncture in history for us to decentralize our, you can't even put one, I was going to say communication infrastructure. We do everything on the internet. We buy things, we communicate, we save pictures, movies, video, everything. It is now time to ensure for the future that the infrastructure cannot be meddled with by corporations, nation states, bad actors. You can think of the scary future where where your health records are snooped on and it's changing the prices of your insurance, or your driving history is looked at so your car costs more. The secret backdoor dealings that advertisers and internet providers can do right now. And I think that's why I'm in blockchain. The old Blockstack billboard, "Can't be evil." It's the old Google slogan of "Don't be evil." We really want the core architecture, the technology, to itself not give anyone the choice to decide if they would like to be evil. So, and we also say user-controlled internet. Right now, the internet's controlled by FANG, unfortunately. They log in with Facebook, log in with Google. They have such a monopolization on the way we interact with the internet. And I think it should be controlled by the users. We're the people using it and consuming content on it. I think it's time we relinquish control from them and give it back to us.
Amen. That was a great.
Joe, would you please talk for 2 more hours? That was beautiful. That was amazing.
I can rant philosophically about blockchain forever.
That was great.
It's too much fun.
Yeah. No, it's like, I often think about, like, imagine like YouTube, like 100 years from now, like how much content would be out there, right? And like that you wouldn't have control of. And that's just media.
Yeah, I always reference, like, we all remember LimeWire and Kazaa and old the .torrent protocol is a decentralized protocol. BitTorrent is a company, but .torrent is a decentralized protocol. The internet had some cool decentralized protocols back in the day. We just need to get back to that and make the core of it decentralized.
Yep. No, it's great. Yeah, gosh, Kazaa, you pulled that one out of a hat. Like LimeWire was all over, and I had Kazaa too. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah,
I'm going to bring this full circle. We sat behind Bram Cohen at the Blockstack Summit at the Computer Science Museum.
Yep.
I remember that.
Yeah. No, the other thing that you kind of touched on there, which, like, talking about it full circle, was like, I don't know, it might have been you that explained it, or someone explained it in a way with like the dumb terminal example. And like all of the data was on the was on the mainframe and then dumb terminal. And then we've kind of moved to, when processing speed and RAM and everything kind of increased, a lot of things moved back down to the device. And then we've slowly moved back to everything is dumb terminal, but just on the cloud. And through that, we've lost so much. And so like, that was like something that kind of always was like, bam, that stuck in my head, just because it was like obviously a little bit before my time with like the dumb terminals. But when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, like it's the same thing.
Yeah. It's also like very interesting to see how when you had IBM and the big companies, and when you got Apple, because Apple was actually giving power to the people, right? So, and they had that ad where, the famous Apple ad where they're throwing stuff at the large IBM monopoly. And interestingly, the same kind of enthusiasm is what we see when this second wave of decentralization is happening, when you're trying to take away power from the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, and people are saying, hey, we want to build decentralized stuff. It's a little bit like, imagine how big of a monopoly IBM was at that time, and these hackers were effectively building computers in their garages, right? Like, hey, I can just assemble my own computer. And it's a little bit like that, where people are like, hey, I can just assemble my own app, and I don't need to depend on Google, and we can just directly start talking to each other. Right? Let's just cut them out. And I think that's just fascinating as a hacker, as an engineer, as a developer, and to just take more control of like your own kind of like destiny online. Like it's fascinating. Going back to the original question, like I think for me, like I know that these days I don't get to like, write that much code or do that much independent research work, but I'm a computer scientist at heart, right? Like I've been doing internet protocol research for, decades. Even before this, I was actually involved with some of the first P2P research wave, like where these protocols like BitTorrent, or there was an entire academic research on, like, people might not even be familiar with this. Like there was Cord, there was all sorts of work coming out of UC Berkeley and whatnot, and it was very exciting. What was disappointing for me as a researcher at that time was a bunch of these protocols basically remain academic prototypes, right? People wrote research papers about it. They got like thousands and thousands of citations, but very little direct impact on how the internet actually works, right? And when I was actually independently looking at upgrading internet infrastructure, And almost by chance or accident, we discovered blockchains as an elegant solution to the problem. And when we discovered it, it was like a rabbit hole. And when we started going down the rabbit hole, it was like, oh, wait a minute, this is what we've been working on for years and years before. Just that now these peer-to-peer protocols have kind of like the notion of money, right, or digital assets that people can trade and people can actually come together, and that actually changes everything because it throws in economics, it throws in real capital that can back some of these efforts and help them commercialize things, but it also throws in governance issues and game theory and all of that. So I think I come mostly from the distributed system side, but I find everything else here extremely fascinating, and it definitely hits the mark on you're making a real impact in the world, and you're just not sitting in a research lab and basically working on something that might never see the light of the day, right? So I think I for years, maybe decades to come, see myself as like solving problems in this area. And maybe once we run out, I don't even know when that would happen, that crypto doesn't have interesting problems to solve. I don't know, maybe I'll move on to quantum computing or something like that.
I think we're a ways away from even getting close to solving all of the problems that it can. And it's so interesting to think about like money and like what is money, and money is just trust, right? And like it was a way to value things when I was trading someone for something and I didn't know how much that was supposed to cost, so we agreed on this thing. And what happens to the world when you don't need that anymore, because the computation is done for you and we can all instantly trade everything, right? And so it's just the ideas that are going to continue to spur out of this, I think, are going to be endless, and hopefully a lot of it gets built on what you guys are building and launching right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the fascinating part. Like, I think when we discovered blockchains and it was 2013 or so, I think for the first time I could actually sense that this is what the early entrepreneurs and scientists with the internet must have felt, like early 90s, late 80s, where there's just so much green field and so many things to innovate. It's not incremental. It's not all the hard problems have been solved. And I had this funny feeling, like I would tell myself that just like look around you, there will be books written about like the people and the events happening around you right now. This is like 2013, Bitcoin is at $90 or something. And then literally books were written about those things down the road, like the Bitcoin billionaires, like Winklevoss brothers were investors in our project and so on. And same for the summit. Like imagine, I think we even said something like that at the summit, that look at the people who are here right now and you will see that they will end up doing big things in this industry and impacting the world at large. And today we connected the dots that you guys are running this. And I actually got a great preview of all the dashboard. And I think it's extremely important information, right? Like you're trying to separate signal from the noise, and you're actually trying to basically figure out that how do you kind of like, is a very sentiment driven market, but how do you get more in-depth, even sentiment data, and clean it up and actually make it more useful to people.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think the big thing for us, and John jump in too, is like, when we were first starting, we were looking at the world and saying, what is all of this? There's way too many of these projects. How do we know the difference? And it's like, with regular investments, there's earnings reports and 10Ks, and there's a way to look at that. With blockchains, with cryptocurrency, it's like, it's all about community. And just like the number of wallets, like John was showing, social contributors, it's like how many people are talking about this? Is there kind of this groundswell of audience that builds behind these projects? Yes or no? And we sitting there, when you're looking on Twitter or Reddit or YouTube, you're seeing like this much, right? And you don't know that there are 300,000 posts a day on Bitcoin alone. And how do you find the signal from the noise? And so for us, it was like, well, can we distill that across the whole market? And what does that do to bring new investors and new people that get excited and are asking those questions like, well, what about this project? What about this one? And we don't realize that now in the tokenized everything world, everyone's just going to go public from day one, right? And you have all eyes on you, and you better be prepared to build that business. And so for us, it's been fun to just see this happen and see the communities growing. And you were talking about how tribal it is. We talk about it all the time. People coming in and just being like, list our project now. And then just the swarm of bots that are actually just real people somehow.
Every day. I think another thing too is like when we go back with where we are today, we found this out the hard way. You know, like we were like every other investor that gets into crypto, and you go on Twitter, you follow a few people and think you have an idea of what's going on, and you have the mental sentiment. You follow 12 people, and so you know it's you get into the wrong projects, you get into the wrong things that are pump and dumps. And we just started by trying to understand, well, what is the network look like of people around this, and what are they saying, and how many are they, and it's important. We're really measuring the network. Aside from price, we're trying to understand like what exactly is out there, and you could kind of relay it downstream and say, well, if no one's talking about it, there's probably not going to be a lot of wallets. There's probably not going to be a lot of trades. There's probably not going to be a lot of utilization, and that's all part of the value. So we're going to get deeper and deeper on what we track, and you know we're just going to keep going. So.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think the interesting thing to me here is also how everything's getting more democratized, in the sense that your product is for anyone, right, around the world. They can come in and they can make use of your dashboard. It's not for Silicon Valley angel investors, or
Right.
at least not just for them, right? It's basically anyone can use these tools.
It's also, I mean, another way to look at this too is like if you go to any of the large crypto exchanges, some of them are, you know, they have hundreds and hundreds of coins, and if you just look at what most of the world is right now with investing, you know, a lot of those coins, there's no liquidity, there's no trade volume. Why are those coins even there? There's no one trading. So, but they're still getting listed. It causes a lot of clutter and a lot of confusion. And so, you know, we see delistings happen. You know, and why are the coins being delisted? Because there's no one talking about it and there's no one trading them. There's no community. So it's another way to look at the whole market beyond just looking at price, which is what I think a lot of individuals get addicted to drawing lines on charts, just looking at price. And I think that's maybe a little bit too limited. It's time to look outside of that.
Cool. Enough about us. Back to you guys.
Yes.
No, I mean, community is number one. I think one of the best parts of this year was when it took some nerves of steel, but we officially closed down our company Slack and migrated completely into our community Discord. We wanted to remove any and all barriers between us and community. Like Muneeb said, we've been diversifying our ecosystem, totally transitioning to Hero, spinning up the Stacks Foundation and Freehold. And we thought another huge step towards just assimilating what used to be Blockstack and the community was going in the Discord. So now even our internal company conversations sometimes happen in public channels. So onlookers can see exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about announcements coming up in public channels. And we've had community members step up to do workshops and demo videos. It's not all the employees of Hero doing these workshops. We have excited community members recording videos and memes, so many memes. We used to sit there and look at the Chainlink meme army and dream, and now we've got a little meme army of ourselves spreading so many funny Muneeb memes.
yeah. I'll tell you a little story about the memes, but in general, like, you know, the interesting thing is that think of us as like scientists and engineers who are literally heads down in R&D lab, and we will pop up, you know, once in a while and announce something to the world. But Stacks 2.0 is literally what we are building towards, right? It's the main blockchain. We released 1.0, but it's a very limited system compared to 2.0. 2.0 is like a 10x or 100x better, fully featured blockchains. In many ways, maybe we should have only released 2.0, right? Like, because that would get that kind of attention. So I want to call that out, that you might actually see, like, in my mind, until 2.0 was live, there's actually not a lot of reason to go out and even spread the world. Or sure, we have a very healthy organic community, but in my mind, like, it's nothing compared to what can be once 2.0 is actually live and people can write these smart contracts, and they can actually, even the US markets, like US markets are not open as we speak right now, right? So the US markets open up, all of the people can actually participate in consensus and use the smart contracts and applications. But interestingly, I actually see my role changing as instead of, you know, more spotlight on me, let's actually do that with the rest of the community and the rest of the leaders in our ecosystem. And in some ways, like, I try to like sit back on a bunch of things now, right? And it's it's actually very healthy to see that other people are taking charge. They're filling in the holes for what's needed in the ecosystem. And I'll just close with some of the meme stuff. I still get targeted as the person for the memes, and I have a 3-year-old, and she has this very interesting, almost like routine, right? Like she has some dedicated time to play with me on my calendar, and she comes in and we play, and she always asks me like, did people make silly things about you like today? And so we actually like scroll through Telegram together, and all the stuff, all of you out there that you're putting out, like at least my 3-year-old finds it amusing as hell. She laughs and she's like, oh, she calls it like silly baba, like sometimes my face on like, like all sorts of like weird, funny things. And it's almost like a daily ritual for us at this point.
That's awesome. I mean, what other industry do you know where people are creating memes, but then also like nickname themselves? Right? Like, you've made it. Like, you guys are going to, like, all these people are going to be called stackers, and they're going to have this own like hashtag. And then you're going to be like, okay, we've created like an absolutely viral community of people that literally have named themselves. It's like no other, it's like Nike doesn't have any, like, you don't call yourself something for like these other brands, but in crypto it exists. And it's like that passion that you don't find literally anywhere else in any industry. So it's just amazing to see.
Absolutely. It's amazing.
Awesome.
I'd love to throw some of these great questions that we're seeing in the thread over here.
Let's do it.
Up on here. So this is an interesting one. So it's talking about Ethereum. They have tremendous momentum. And what are you doing to capture developers' interest? From Joe Wandy. I'll give him a shout out.
Yeah.
Nice meme.
I think that's great. I would just point out to like how early it is in crypto. There's a report that came out by Electric Capital, and I think they were charting out the ecosystem. And the thing that stood out to me was there are 8,000 monthly active developers in crypto, period. 8,000, right? So imagine the next 90,000 developers that are going to enter. And interestingly, I think most people discover Bitcoin first. But because Bitcoin is not programmable, then they look for, okay, what is programmable? And that's how they discover Ethereum or some of the other blockchains. So I think for us, the path forward is actually how do you educate developers? Like how do you educate them? What is crypto? How do you program Bitcoin? How do you write smart contracts? The 99% of the developers out there have never written a smart contract. This is like, early internet days where 99% of developers have never published a website. Nobody knows how to publish a website, right? So I think it's greenfield. Yes, Ethereum has more developers, and we don't necessarily want to compete there because, interestingly, in my view, Ethereum actually attracts a certain type of developer, people who are more experimental, people who are fine with, there are things like testing in production, like people who actually want to test in production might actually go there and they will fit better in that culture. Whereas if you want to, you're a little bit like, keeping money on a JavaScript like language would freak you out and you wouldn't be able to go to sleep, and you belong to a certain school of thought for how software should be designed and how it should be built. Like you can find a natural home for yourself in what we're doing. And I think just like programming languages, every programming language has like almost like a cult-like following, and they would argue it to death that no, my programming language is better than yours, right? Like I think that stuff also happens. So I would say there's a sea of developers out there. Some of them are going to be more comfortable in one school of thought, and others are going to be more comfortable in our school of thought.
That's great.
Yeah,
along Doran with 100.
Joe wants to. You want to dive in on that one, Joe?
A little bit. I mean, I spent 3 years in the Ethereum community. I worked at Consensus for a long time with Joe Lubin. No, I love Ethereum. I really do. But I think in this case, as for incentivizing those types of developers, we're going to let our tech speak for itself. The Clarity smart contract language is super powerful, super secure. We have seen time and time again Solidity shoot Ethereum in the foot. The DAO hack, reentrancy, the multi-sig parity hack was reentrancy. Speaking of testing and production, the Yam Finance fiasco, all the meme coins over the summer of people deploying contracts, raising millions and millions of dollars, and then they're like, oh yeah, by the way, that wasn't audited, which is outrageous. Clarity is interpreted and decidable. It's not getting all manipulated by the EVM Ethereum. What you see is what you get, which makes it super easy to audit. And there's no gas, there's no reentrancy. It is deliberately not Turing complete, which you may think comes with some shortcomings, but there is the ability to replicate so much functionality from Solidity in Clarity. Throughout our hackathons on the testnet, we saw a Uniswap clone, an Ampleforth clone, adaptive currency, and then in our last one, we saw a perfect migration of Moloch DAO into Clarity DAO. We're seeing all of these DeFi, DApp, NFT things that are possible on Ethereum done on Stacks 2.0 in Clarity and are just more secure and you can trust more.
Well.
Yeah, I mean, you're just optimizing, like you were talking about, letting the community take the lead. It's kind of like Shopify in those early days of, they always said that the developer community needed to make more money than they did, right? And it's like people dedicated their life to building on that network, and they've created companies that have sizable valuations and throw off a lot of cash simply being on the Shopify network. And it's like you have to optimize to let it outgrow you and let the idea be bigger than you. And if you don't, then you're going to be stuck. So it's like you guys seem to be in that realm. John, you got any more in there?
Yeah, there's a few other good ones from Saitama Go on YouTube. After Stacks 2.0 mainnet, what will we be expecting from Stacks?
Yeah, so I think what I can talk a little bit about what should you expect from our company, Hero. So Hero, actually, as of today, today was a big milestone for us. Like Stacks 2.0 blockchain is now feature complete, meaning everything we wanted to program, it's actually out there. Yes, we'll do more security audits and some bug fixes and whatnot, but we're done with building the blockchain. This is like more than 2 years of work.
Celebration.
I think it's something like 5,000 commits, like 600,000 additions and whatnot. But super excited about it. And interestingly, our company is now going to narrow down our focus to, instead of building the public infrastructure, building things on top of the public infrastructure, right? So more tooling for Clarity. Maybe we'll build smart contracts ourselves or some applications and so on. But we are now almost like a developer tooling company in the Stacks ecosystem. And then the Stacks ecosystem now has support for various things, like the Stacks Foundation is giving out a lot of grants to support like all the different kind of things that Joe was mentioning, that people are trying to build these decentralized exchanges on Bitcoin. Like almost imagine that there is a BTC only DEX that is running, and you can do Bitcoin trades there. Or Joe was mentioning earlier about how the Clarity gas fees are actually precise, meaning that one of the reasons why there's a gas estimate in Solidity is because you don't know what the program is going to do. So you give an estimate for how much gas it might consume. But over here, because the gas is precise, because you know precisely what the program is going to do, like even before executing it, that was the hard thing. And it's almost like night and day. Because you know exactly what the program is going to do, you can also have proofs of liquidity, meaning that my trade is only going to happen if there's enough liquidity there on the other side, right? So people have like new types of almost like superpowers, and I would love to see them using it on the Stacks chain. So I think the big difference is going to be, instead of like me or Joe getting excited about what people are kind of like building on the testnet, it's more about just go and use this thing. It's already live on mainnet, and you can actually play with it and see how it's doing.
Awesome. I think we got time for maybe one more.
Yeah, I actually want to ask your question, Joe. You said if you could snap your fingers and a piece of your roadmap would be done today, what would you choose and why?
Oh yeah, I forgot I wrote that down.
That's a good question.
Take your time. I was thinking about this last night as I was writing it. I was like, what would we? I think I know what it would be, but we could talk about that offline. What do you guys think?
For me, we're starting to spin up chapters around the globe, and this past week or the week before, we're spinning up the Stacks Pakistan chapter, and there's some education to be done there to equip them to then go out and give workshops and stuff of that nature. I think if I could have one thing, I would just snap and have there magically be Stacks chapters all over the globe, and all of these like vibrant technological hubs just attracting new regional developers and dipping into different communities. We've this year I've done so many virtual events in places that if it was in real life, I wouldn't have done the event because it was an India AMA or Istanbul live stream or something like that. And I've just been blown away by how passionate people are about Stacks on the other side of the planet, you know, from where the company was started. And yeah, so I think I would fast forward to the part where we have all of these Stacks chapters around the world that are doing a lot of the education on their own and by their own volition, just because they're excited about the tech.
Great answer.
It's great.
Yeah, I think if you could, maybe this is not on our roadmap, but if I can take the question more broadly, if I could just like snap my finger and have something done, I would probably like write a book on how to program smart contracts and just have it be done and available to all the engineers who are like trying to learn this technology. Basically, I think is the computer scientist in me speaking. Like I want to like get into the weeds, like with the engineers, almost like classes that, hey, here's how this thing is different, and here's how you do formal verification, and here are the benefits of formal verification, and here's how you write your program and publish it. Here's the benefit of like not having a compiler. Like it's a little bit like a design trade-offs thing that you literally write a book about it, that here are the design decisions, here's what you get if you pick this design versus that design, and just educate people, because that would just be good for the industry. But obviously, you know, my confidence level is high that the students of that book will end up writing programs in Clarity on Bitcoin.
Well, that'd be amazing. We got to do what Randy Posh from the last lecture that he did. He knew he only had so much time, and so he just dictated a book every day to an editor on his bike. It was like 1 hour a day, and he like finished a book in like 6 months. So I'd love to see that. But well, you guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. This was super fun. This was like a treat for us to have you on and learn a little bit about you guys personally, and then, you know, Stacks and what you're up to. We're so excited and just really appreciate you guys coming on. This was awesome. And John, you're the man. Thank you guys. All right, everyone in the chat, thank you so much for getting on there. We appreciate it, and all your questions. Everyone have a good day.
Yeah, thanks so much for having